The following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station or Pamel Broadcasting. And the views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, and callers of this program are solely their own. They do not represent or reflect the views, policies, or official position of ACA, its affiliates, or its staff. ACA does not endorse any statements made during this broadcast. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 31 Autism Today is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 31 Autism Today, the weekly podcast on topics associated with autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And on behalf of the center and on behalf of Anderson Foundation for Autism, I'd like to welcome Ashley Wool to the show. Ashley, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to speak on anything autism advocacy related, but especially considering you're so close to home for me. I'm from northern Westchester County originally. Nice. And of course, I found out about the podcast because WHUD is my station's hometown. So thanks for having me.
We love our partners and always glad to know somebody is listening to this and taking something away from it. And just the icing on top is that you reached out asking to be a guest. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Ashley, why don't we start? I know that you reached out to us. Let me just give a little background here. You reached out to us because you made your Broadway debut, congratulations, in 2023 in a musical called How to Dance in Ohio, which got quite a lot of recognition, especially in this community. And I'm going to give it to you to kind of explain, give some background on yourself, and maybe also explain why you think How to Dance in Ohio was so immediately recognized as unique, standout, kind of leading edge. So all right. Take it away, Ashley.
Thanks. So I'm a Westchester County native and all grew up in the theater scene of Westchester County, decided pretty early on that was what I wanted to do the rest of my life. Went to college for it at SUNY Geneseo, and my junior year at Geneseo, I was diagnosed with autism. Mm-hmm. I can give you all of the childhood you should have knowns that there were, mm-hmm. But I always knew I was different in a lot of ways, especially socially. I felt like I really cared about people, but I felt like interacting with them was like trying to figure out a slightly different species. Like I would observe my peers the way that, a scientist observes a hive of bees. Like, okay. You want to not piss off the bees. You want to be their friend. You might find that you'll have a copacetic relationship with them, but they still know that you're not a bee. And that's kind of...
That's a great description. Okay.
I mean, but nobody really picked out autism for a couple reasons. One, because it was the 90s and we just didn't know a lot. And what we did know was very limited. And it was limited to boys specifically, mm-hmm. and not even really girls at all, which is still the case in a lot of autism.
Still a very big thing, yes.
But I was actually told by my school psychologist who came to see me in How to Dance in Ohio. She said, "This is going to sound really problematic when I say it out loud, but I already know that you know it's true. We didn't consider autism as a possibility for you because when you were a kid, you exhibited such a high degree of empathy." And she was like, we thought that not having empathy was a core tenet of autism at that time. And she was one of the leading kind of voices and specializations on autism at that time in the early 90s.
Yeah.
But the reason they missed it was because of what we didn't know about expressions of empathy in particular, which leads me to why I kept my diagnosis a secret for over 10 years. Mm-hmm. Because here I was trying to make it in musical theater. What do you need to be in musical theater? You need to have a high degree of empathy. You need to be able to stay curious about other people's perspectives. You need to be able to have healthy, trusting relationships with people. You need to be very expressive. And of course, all of the stereotypes at the time around autism were saying you can't be those things. Mm-hmm. And was a hard thing to face down, because even if I knew that that wasn't true about me, I felt like I was already different enough to have people cock their heads about me. But I thought, if I'm walking into an audition room and people are automatically assuming I am all of these negative things, they're going to disqualify me before I even open my mouth. I really didn't want to, it was a lot of my own internalized ableism and failure to learn. I can definitely pin a lot of that on myself. But, that was also just baked into the reality of what it meant to be an actor, especially a theater actor.
Yeah.
You are really taught to be doormats, essentially. You want to be the person who does the most for the least amount of work. It's very, we call it the toxic, the show must go on culture.
Okay.
Because we've kind of taken that to the extreme,
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating listening to you, because just one thing you said a minute ago really, really struck me, that you're already feeling a level of, I know that I'm different. You said I'm different enough already. I think that was exactly what you said. And so on top of it, the pressure that I'm guessing from the way you're talking, you must have felt of, I don't want to add this additional thing on, because you're talking about a word that I don't use very often, but it's striking me right now, dissonance. It's like another thing that isn't going to make sense to the general public, because maybe you felt like, I already don't make, neurotypical sense, right? And
Exactly.
I hope that you don't take, that's meant fully respectfully, but
no, I know what you mean.
On top of it, then there's this sense of, and now I'm a theater major and I love musical theater and that's what I want to do. And this isn't going to fit into people's, acceptance or thought process about what's going to be successful either. Right. So that's just very interesting. It's really fascinating hearing your perspective. Forgive me for the interruption. Please keep going.
Sorry. No, well, what I was saying is, between the stigma that already existed around autism and the expectations on actors in particular, that you are replaceable, you can't be difficult, you can't be seen as difficult. It's already harder as a woman if somebody sees you as difficult. If you're disabled on top of that, then they start throwing the words around like liability and excess expenditures, because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Yeah. People think accommodations means, being extravagant. It's not money, something that budget. They want to think about, because actors aren't supposed to need anything ever anyway.
Okay. This is a world that I am not familiar with, but it's really interesting. So we have a couple of minutes before we go to a break, Ashley. So I don't know, there's so many places I want to go. I love the fact that your school psychologist came back to see you in the show, and gave you that feedback. That's amazing. I think that's very unique, and something probably a lot of people would love to ask their former school psychologists or social workers or teachers, like, why? What was there? Let me ask you this. Did that bring you a sense of relief or a sense of anger? What was your emotional reaction to hearing that's her being honest and that's what happened?
Well, I always would have trusted her to be real with me, because she always was real with me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really made her, I think, a great school psychologist is that she never wanted to make us feel like she was the only one with the answer, that we were kind of the architects of our own communication, that, she could be wrong about things too. I remember her demonstrating that for us, when we were younger and we'd be in sessions. So it didn't make me feel anything really. It's just, I'm glad I wasn't diagnosed when I was younger, but I'm glad because the research was so limited and the knowledge and understanding and acceptance were so limited. I don't think it would have benefited me at the time to have all of that stigma attached to me from a young age. I think if a child who is exactly like me was born today, she would benefit from an earlier diagnosis, but only because of what we now know.
Yeah, interesting. Gosh, I could just your wealth of information, and I love how open you're being today. This is great. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, actually, I think we should transition into how to dance in Ohio,
Yep.
because I do think there's probably a lot of people who are eager to hear from you, who was in the Broadway debut of the show. Now that it's licensed and you can put it on, how to do it and retain the essence of sort of the original without losing sight of the aspects of it that were so incredibly unique and ideally should continue. We're going to take a short break. This is 1 in 31, the weekly podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky. We'll be right back.
To every referee, umpire, and judge in high school sports, we want to say, we see you.
We see everything you do for us that goes unnoticed.
We see the positive role models that you are.
We see the way you get unfairly criticized just for doing your job.
The truth is, we couldn't play without you.
So thank you for investing your time in us.
Thank you for protecting the integrity of the game, no matter what.
We hope you always know how much we appreciate you.
Because without you, this is just recess. It's not really a game.
Thank you for always making it possible for us to play the sports we love.
Want to serve the students in your community? Sign up to become an official in New York at highschoolofficials.com.
I'm Angela Bassett. As a first responder on screen, I know what it means to act fast in an emergency. In real life, the same urgency can save lives, especially when it comes to food allergy. For 33 million Americans, one bite can cause a life-threatening reaction. Now, there's a needle-free option, a new way to carry epinephrine. Know the risk, know the options. Be ready to act. Learn more at foodallergy.org/ready to act.
And now, 1 in 31, Autism Today, continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs presentation from the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 31, Autism Today, the podcast on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and I'm talking with Ashley Wool. Ashley, you've been amazing in this first half of the show, sharing your background, some of your story, although I'm sure it's not all of your story, answering my questions, which I appreciate. There's another part that we wanted to talk about today, which I think is extremely important. And obviously, you made it to Broadway in 2023 in a musical called How to Dance in Ohio, which I think most of our listeners probably know about. And you were one of the 7 autistic characters that were cast with autistic actors. That was very new, historical first, and really fascinating, and I think led to a significant amount of media coverage and success. So I'd love to hear about what that was like for you, but I want to make sure we also leave room for the fact that as of 2026, February of this year, the licensing rights have been released, which means that this can now be performed by regional, educational, and community theaters. And a lot of people are reaching out to you with this wonderful question, which I'm so glad people are asking, which is, how do I produce the show in a way that gets it right? And it's a great sign that people are asking that question, because that means that they want to get it right. But I want to see what you can offer here on the podcast today about how you're answering that question. So take either one you want, kind of what your experience was like, or answering that question, and we'll just go from there.
All right. Well, talk about getting it right. For me, the thing that made the experience of taking the show to Broadway so right was the fact that accessibility was built into the framework of the production from the beginning. It was always, we talked extensively about this, accessibility as a priority, not as an afterthought.
Okay.
And we wanted to create a safe space to be uncomfortable with not knowing what we don't know about each other. Because whenever you assemble a diverse group of people, you're going to have conflicting ideas, conflicting experiences. It's not necessarily always going to be comfortable, but it should never get disrespectful and it should never get avoidant. We should be able to talk about what we don't understand about each other's experience. Whether that is regarding disability, gender, race, any of those things.
Yeah.
And so I would say when you ask about getting it right, is that what you're working towards? And I say working towards because you're probably never going to get it perfectly right. There are lots of different ways in which, even with the best intentions, it's not necessarily going to pan out the way you hoped. But what matters is not that it's not what you disagree on. If you agree on the values, it's okay to disagree on the methodology. That's what I'm trying to say, I think.
Okay. This piece about creating a space and an environment where you purposely left room for the things that you don't know about each other. I say this all the time when I'm presenting, and I just did a presentation for a group of lovely people down in Rockland County actually last night. And one of the things that I told them as it's Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month this month was, one main thing when you're interacting with somebody in your community who might be autistic and might be, looking like they need help, but you're not sure, don't know, what do I do? Answering that question is I say, remember that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know everything that's going on in that situation. So I love that you said a very similar thing when it comes to making an environment and an experience feel accessible. Also, I think very important to underscore that was what you led with, as opposed to let's gather all the actors and build the set and do the script and have the music and then figure out how we can keep these people somewhat comfortable, as opposed to let's make everybody feel comfortable and sort of person first, and then the rest will come.
Right.
Right. So that sounds like a big one to get it right.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is rooted in just a pretty simple question that you should ask everyone in the cast and the crew, whether they have a diagnosed disability or not, is what do you need to do your best work?
Yeah.
Because disability or no disability, everybody still has different learning styles. Everybody has different sensory preferences. Everybody has different ways of interpreting information. So one of the major things that I would recommend I think every theater and every production ever, but certainly if you're going to do How to Dance in Ohio and you want to prioritize accessibility, is to create a survey. And I think the director should do this, but then also solicit input from any stage manager, technical people, making sure you're asking questions of your employees. I'll say, even if they're volunteers, they can be employees. What do you need to do your best work? What kind of break structure do you prefer? I remember they asked us questions about costumes, like, are there any materials or fabrics or styles that make you uncomfortable?
Sure.
Is there anything that you'd prefer? People would, we talk about different ways of receiving notes, because sometimes at the end of a long day, receiving notes can just feel like piling more stuff on that you can't process. One thing also that I would point out about this is you're also going to probably encounter situations where you'll have conflicting access needs and you won't be able to accommodate everybody. But that's why I go back to the idea of a safe space to not know what we need, or what's a safe space to be uncomfortable, essentially.
Yeah.
Because there's probably not going to be a scenario where you can always meet every access need for everyone every time. And so there's going to be some discomfort. How do we create a safe space to navigate that discomfort while also just kind of sitting with it and moving forward with it?
Yeah, it sounds incredibly purposeful and impactful and wonderful. I love the question about what do you need in order to do your best work. That's so different than look at all the stuff we have so that you will do
Right.
your best work for us. There's such a difference in that message.
Yeah,
But
because
then
you're
it
not
also
assuming, you're asking.
exactly. And you're soliciting from the person who knows, not the person who thinks they know.
Exactly.
So I think that's great. I also want to point out, I hear this, this comes up a lot. Much of what you're saying, I think would also likely be beneficial to anyone working in
Exactly.
any environment.
And everyone who has worked in that environment with us has said so themselves.
I would think so. So, question, was there an effort made to also employ people behind the scenes who were autistic in the show?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I was talking to one of them this morning, my friend Nicole D'Angelo, who was, oh my gosh, what wasn't she? Assistant music director, script supervisor, accessibility member of the accessibility team. Oh, Drama Desk Award winning accessibility team.
All right.
Wearing a lot of
Congratulations.
different hats. We had autistic producers, like some of our significant producers.
Cool.
We had people on the tech team. We did have a very specifically curated accessibility team that was comprised entirely of autistic people from all manner of theater life. And they worked really closely with pretty much everybody because I think a lot of people don't understand how many blueprints we didn't have to follow.
Yeah.
How often do we need to be checking in with each other? What are the best ways to be checking in with each other? What are the best ways of determining whose voice we are not really listening to or need to be paying more attention to?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of a lifelong process. And the thing that I regret the most about the show closing when it did is I wish we had had more time to iron out the things that we hadn't figured out yet. And that's why it's exciting now to get to see other people around the country give it a shot themselves, because maybe they can figure out parts of it that we didn't get right too.
Well, I
So
think,
that
I
was-
mean,
like to say like how do you get it right? You might get some things right without even trying. You might get things right that we didn't.
Yeah.
So don't assume you won't get it right.
I think that's, being open to the fact that you're all going to keep learning from each other and the idea of seeing a next generation, maybe. I mean, I'm envisioning this being, maybe done in high school someplace. I like the idea of this being an opportunity for a high schooler who may still be feeling very, lost. Not sure where they fit, not sure if there's something for them, but loves this. And we're almost out of time, so I have to finish this, but I really love the idea of everything you're saying, all of the insight you're providing. I love that people are asking you this question. I know that you gave us your email address. Can I share that now with the public?
People can find me. To email?
Well, no, I mean, if people want to get in touch with you to ask you further questions or to follow up in any way, how should they find you?
I'm on all the socials at It's Ashley Wool. ITS Ashley Wool.
It's Ashley Wool. Love
most
it.
active on Instagram. I don't remember the last time I was on TikTok. So.
Oh, well, no problem there. Okay, so at It's Ashley Wool. Ashley, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been amazing. I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and I hope that you continue to just get yourself out there and stay connected to this community. It sounds certainly like you will because you're so passionate about it. But sharing your story, which is incredibly unique, and having the chance to just hear directly from you has been a real treasure for me. I really appreciate it. And I would encourage our listeners to get in touch with you at It's Ashley Wool.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you to say. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Ashley. This is 1 in 31 Autism Today, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 31 Autism Today, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.